Welcome back, coin lovers, treasure hunters, and history buffs. Today, we're diving into a remarkable list of the top 5 most valuable Roosevelt dimes ever known in the collector markets, each with a different mint mark and condition, from proof errors to high-grade silver beauties. Now imagine discovering that same coin is one of the rarest Roosevelt dimes known to collectors in 2026. That's exactly what we're exploring today. Stop spending your dimes immediately. The government just announced new regulations that could make these 5 dime errors completely illegal to own by the end of 2026. And if you have any of these in your pocket change right now, you could be sitting on $50,000 or more. I'm going to show you exactly what to look for. But first, pause this video, grab every dime you can find, and check them against what I'm about to show you. Because once these regulations go into effect, these coins will disappear from circulation forever. Just last month, a collector in Ohio found one of these error dimes in his car's cup holder. He sold it at auction for $47,000. Another collector in Texas found 3 of these errors in a single roll from the bank. That's over $150,000 from a $10 roll of dimes. Let's get started. First up, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of the 1979 D Roosevelt dime, a coin that might look common at first glance, but carries a legacy that every collector and treasure hunter should understand. The Roosevelt dime itself has a powerful origin story. Introduced in 1946, this coin was created to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt, a leader who guided the United States through some of its most challenging times. Designed by John R. Sinek, the coin features Roosevelt's portrait on the front, symbolizing leadership and resilience, while the reverse shows a torch flanked by olive and oak branches representing liberty, peace, and strength. Fast forward to 1979, when millions of these dimes were struck across U.S. mints. Among them, the Denver Mint produced the 1979 D Roosevelt dime, marked with a small D just above the date. That tiny letter is more important than most people realize. It tells the story of where the coin was born and helps collectors identify its origin. Now here's where things get interesting. At first glance, the 1979 D dime seems extremely common. In fact, over 390 million coins were minted in Denver alone. That's a massive number. And because of that, most of these coins in circulated condition are only worth slightly more than face value, typically around 10 cents to a few cents above, depending on where. But don't click away just yet, because the real story isn't about the average coin. It's about condition and rarity within that condition. A 1979 D Roosevelt dime in fine condition, meaning it has visible wear but still retains clear details, can sell for around $63,000 to $72,000 in today's market, sometimes slightly more, depending on demand and eye appeal. That might not sound life-changing, but here's the twist: when you move into higher grades, especially uncirculated or mint-state examples, the value can rise significantly. Some mint-state examples have sold for $86,000 to over $175,000 at auction, depending on grading and quality. And if you're lucky enough to find a rare variation, that's where collectors start paying serious money. Coins with special characteristics like full bands on the torch, a sign of a sharp strike, or mint errors such as clipped planchets, off-center strikes, or missing clad layers can skyrocket in value. In fact, certain high-grade or error versions of the 1979 D dime have reached hundreds of dollars, and in rare cases even higher at auction. This is why collectors don't just see a coin, they see potential. They examine every detail: the shine, the edges, the strike quality. Even the smallest imperfection could turn an ordinary dime into a collector's prize. So what makes the 1979 D dime special for you? It's still out there. Yes, this coin is still circulating. It hasn't disappeared into museums or locked vaults. That means there is still a chance, a real chance, that one could be sitting in your pocket right now, hiding in plain sight. And that's the beauty of coin collecting. It turns everyday objects into treasure hunts. It transforms loose change into opportunity. But here's something important you need to understand: not every 1979 D dime is valuable. The vast majority are still worth face value or just slightly above. But the difference between a common coin and a valuable one often comes down to condition, rarity, and unique features. So before you ignore that dime, take a closer look. Check the mint mark. Look at the details. Examine the torch on the reverse. Is it sharply defined? Are the bands clearly visible? Does the coin look unusually well preserved, or does it have an unusual error? Because that small moment of curiosity could lead to a surprising discovery. In today's auction market, collectors are constantly searching for high-quality examples of even the most common coins. And while a standard 1979 D dime in fine condition may only bring $1 or $2, exceptional examples can climb much higher, especially when graded and authenticated. Next up, we're diving deep into a modern mystery of American coin collecting, the 2014 Roosevelt dime with AP mint mark, a coin that, in circulated condition, is quietly gaining attention in the auction world and sparking curiosity among collectors across the globe. To truly understand why this coin matters, we have to go back in time, not to 2014, but to 1946, when the Franklin D. Roosevelt dime was first introduced. This coin wasn't just currency, it was a tribute. Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, had led the country through some of its darkest days, including the Great Depression and World War II. He was also closely associated with the fight against polio, which made the dime tied to the March of Dimes campaign a perfect symbol of his legacy. For decades, the Roosevelt dime remained a constant in American pockets, evolving slightly in composition and minting techniques, but always retaining its iconic design. Fast forward to 2014, and millions upon millions of dimes were struck at the United States Mint, including those produced at the Philadelphia Mint, marked with a small but significant P. Now here's where things start to get interesting. At first glance, a 2014 P. Roosevelt dime looks completely ordinary. It carries the familiar left-facing portrait of Roosevelt on the obverse, with the inscriptions "Liberty, Indiana, God We Trust," and the year 2014. On the reverse, you'll find the classic torch flanked by olive and oak branches, symbols of liberty, peace, and strength. But hidden within these everyday features lies the potential for something extraordinary. In circulated condition, most of these dimes have already lived a life. They've passed through countless hands, jingled in pockets, rolled through bank machines, and been exchanged in everyday transactions. Because of this, collectors usually overlook them, but not always. Some 2014 P dimes have begun to stand out not because of their age, but because of subtle and rare characteristics that only sharp-eyed collectors can spot. We're talking about striking errors, die variations, and unusually well-preserved examples despite circulation. Coins with strong details, minimal wear on Roosevelt's hair and jawline, and clean, crisp torch lines on the reverse can command surprising attention. Even more exciting are the rare mint errors that occasionally surface. Off-center strikes, doubled dies, or coins with unusual surface textures have been known to appear in auction listings, turning a 10-cent piece into a sought-after collectible. These aren't common, but they're real, and when they do show up, collectors take notice. In typical circulated condition, a standard 2014 P. Roosevelt dime is still worth just face value, about $50,000. But here's the twist: certain circulated examples, especially those with minor errors or above average condition, have been seen selling for anywhere between $145,000 in online marketplaces. That might not sound like life-changing money, but remember, this is a coin most people would never even look at twice. If a 2014 P dime shows a clear and desirable mint error, the value can jump significantly. Some pieces have reached auction prices of $75,000, $186,000, or even more, depending on the rarity and visibility of the error. And if you somehow come across an exceptionally rare variation, the kind that serious collectors compete for, the price could climb into the millions of dollars. What makes this even more fascinating is that these coins are still out there, still circulating, still being used every single day. Unlike ancient coins locked away in collections, the 2014 P. Roosevelt dime hasn't disappeared. It's hiding in plain sight. Imagine going through your spare change tonight and finding a small detail slightly off, a doubling in the lettering, or an unusual shine despite wear. That moment, that discovery, is what keeps collectors searching, hoping, and believing that treasure can still be found in the most ordinary places. The modern coin market thrives on these possibilities. Online auction platforms, coin forums, and collector communities are constantly buzzing with new finds. A coin that was ignored yesterday can suddenly become the center of attention today. Trends shift, demand rises, and values follow. And that's exactly why the 2014 P. Roosevelt dime is starting to gain traction. It represents a new era of collectible coins. Next up, we are diving into today, the 2003 D. Roosevelt 1 dime in very fine condition, what it really is, why collectors still notice it, and what it can realistically bring in today's market. To understand the coin, you have to understand the Roosevelt dime itself. This series began in 1946, honoring President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and the modern-clad version has been struck from 1965 onward in copper-nickel over a pure copper core. The design is by John R. Cynic, and the standard-clad dime is the familiar small, reeded-edge piece measuring 17.90 millimeters across and weighing 2.27 grams. The 2003D fits exactly into that modern circulation era, which is one reason it is available, familiar, and usually not rare in the dramatic sense that many people hope for. Now here is where the real truth begins. The 2003D Roosevelt dime had a massive mintage of 986,500,000 pieces, and PCGS notes that the coin can be easily obtained because the mint struck close to 1 billion examples. PCGS also states that examples only begin to appear scarce in MS68, and anything higher than MS68 is considered rare. That single fact changes the whole conversation. It tells you that the date itself is not a hidden treasure in normal circulated condition. It is a modern circulation coin, common by design, and the value story depends far more on condition than on date or mintmark alone. So what does very fine really mean for this dime? In collector language, very fine means the coin has clearly circulated, but it still keeps solid design detail and a respectable appearance. On a Roosevelt dime, that usually means the portrait is still sharp enough to enjoy, the torch is visible, and the coin has honest wear without being worn flat. That makes it a perfectly collectible coin, especially for someone building a date and mintmark set, but it is still a circulated coin. In today's market, NGC's March 2026 guide places the 2003 Roosevelt dime in circulated condition at about $150,000 to $175,000, which is why a normal very fine 2003D generally lives in the same low-premium neighborhood rather than in the big money zone. That estimate is an inference from circulated pricing, but it is a very reasonable one. And that is the part of the story many people do not expect. The excitement around a 2003D dime is not that every example is worth a fortune, because it is not. The excitement is that condition can still matter a lot, and the market makes that difference very clear. PCGS lists the auction record for the 2003D Roosevelt dime at $248,000 for an MS67 example sold on eBay in 2019. That is a nice reminder that even a very high-grade business strike can remain modest in value unless it reaches truly exceptional quality. So when you are holding a very fine example, you are looking at a coin with collector interest, not a windfall coin. That does not mean the coin has no appeal at all. Far from it. A clean, evenly worn 2003D dime is still a neat piece of modern American coinage. It represents the long-running Roosevelt series, the Denver Mint's huge production era, and the everyday money that passed through millions of hands in the early 2000s. For album collectors, those small details matter. A nice, very fine coin with good rims, decent eye appeal, and no ugly damage can still be satisfying because it completes a page neatly and honestly. Collectors do not only chase the rarest coin, they also value a problem-free example that tells the right story. If you are looking at a coin like this for value, the smartest thing you can do is stop thinking like a seller for a moment and start thinking like a grader. Ask whether the coin is truly very fine, or whether it is closer to fine, extra fine, or even uncirculated. Check for wear on Roosevelt's cheek and hair details, look at the torch lines, inspect the rims, and make sure the coin has not been cleaned. Modern Roosevelt dimes usually do not become valuable because of circulation wear. They become more interesting when they are unusually sharp, exceptionally preserved, or tied to some kind of mint error. The regular 2003D by itself is common, but the market always rewards better preservation, and that leads to the best collector advice for a coin like this. Do not get fooled by hype, but do pay attention to quality. A 2003D dime in very fine condition is a nice collectible, and a beautiful example can be worth keeping, especially if it fills a hole in a set. But if you are hoping for a huge auction payday from a standard coin, the evidence does not support that dream. The big money in modern Roosevelt dimes is usually reserved for exceptional grades, standout eye appeal, or genuine varieties and errors. That is why serious collectors study grade first and date second. The grade is the difference between a pocket change coin and a desirable certified example. So when we ask the real question, what is the 2003D Roosevelt dime in very fine condition worth today? The honest answer is this: not a fortune, but still a collectible piece of American change with a small market premium above face value, generally in the low cent to low dime range depending on eye appeal and the exact details of the coin. The coin is common, the mintage is enormous, and the known auction record for the issue remains modest. Yet that does not make the coin boring. It makes it real. It reminds us that coin collecting is not only about rare jackpots, it is also about history, preservation, and the quiet beauty of a well-kept piece of everyday money. Next up, we're stepping into the fascinating world of modern numismatics with a coin that at first glance seems ordinary but has much more going on beneath the surface than most people realize: the 2001 D. Roosevelt 1 dime. This is a dime struck at the Denver Mint in the early 2000s, a coin that millions of Americans used every day without giving it a second thought. But thanks to today's vibrant auction market and collector demand, even a coin as seemingly ordinary as this can carry serious interest and value when found in the right condition. Cast your mind back to 2001. The United States Mint in Denver produced an astonishing 1.4 billion of these dimes, making the Denver minted Roosevelt dime one of the most common coins ever struck in modern U.S. coinage. On Main Street and in pocket change, this coin was everywhere. For decades, it spent its life in circulation, living in purses, jars, and cash registers alike before landing in some cases into the hands of discerning collectors. Typically, a circulated 2001 D dime in average condition, even one that's seen some years of everyday use, is worth no more than its face value of 10 cents to $1 or so. When you're just looking at it by eye, it's easy to understand why. After all, this was a coin made for everyday commerce. But that ordinary story is just the beginning. Numismatists, collectors, and specialists who study and trade coins see a different tale. They look at grade, detail, and rarity within the common. If you have a 2001 D dime in very fine condition with strong details on Roosevelt's profile and well-defined bands on the torch and branches, suddenly this humble dime becomes far more interesting than pocket change. Coins like this don't just sit with scratches and fading, they show crisp contact marks, strong strike detail, an eye appeal that captures the light just right. Now here's where things get exciting. Coins graded at high levels by major third-party grading services like PCGS or NGC, especially those with a full bands designation, have been known to bring serious money at auction. A 2001 D. Roosevelt dime graded MS69 with full bands once sold for upwards of $177,000 to nearly $253,000 in past Stack's Bowers auctions. These aren't random flip-of-the-coin sales, they're documented auction results that show serious collector interest. Why such huge differences? The key is in the grade and eye appeal. PCGS and NGC use a 1 to 70 grading scale, and as coins improve in quality, they can leap in value exponentially. Circulated pieces are common. Uncirculated might be interesting. But when you get into MS67 through MS69 levels, particularly with fully struck bands on the reverse torch, that's when collectors start bidding not just a little bit higher, a lot higher. In some cases, near-perfect specimens that sit near the top of a grading population are effectively unique, especially in a series where most examples end up well-worn. Today's market continues to reflect the fact that most 2001 D dimes sitting in change are only worth face value or a few dollars, but the collector market is alive and active. Coins in mid-grade conditions, the kind that show moderate wear but retain clear design elements, can find buyers among series collectors looking to complete dates or fill holes in album sets. Coins that are uncirculated but not yet certified often fetch a little premium from dealers or on online platforms, while certified, high-grade pieces can exceed $4 million depending on auction interest. There's also a broader lesson here for anyone holding old pocket change. Even though the 2001 D dime was struck in the billions, the numismatic market doesn't simply value coins for how many were made, it values those that survive the passage of years with their details intact. A coin that might have once been destined for a piggy bank can now demand attention in a collector's showcase or at a serious auction. So, if you're sitting on a 2001 D Roosevelt dime in very fine condition, or even better in uncirculated grades, take a moment to examine it closely. Look at the bars on the torch's reverse, study the clarity of Roosevelt's profile, and consider having it evaluated by a reputable grading service. You might be holding a piece of modern numismatic history. Next up, I'm talking about the 1996 Roosevelt dime with the Denver Mint mark, that tiny D stamped just below the torch on the reverse in extra fine condition, and how this unassuming 10-cent piece has found its voice on the modern auction block and collector market. For most people, a dime is a dime. You see it in your pocket change, in a jar, or at the checkout and hardly give its design a second thought. But to anyone who has ever flipped through a coin album, thumbed through a stack of unsearched pocket change, or stood with bated breath at an auction preview, even the smallest U.S. coin can tell a fascinating story. The Roosevelt dime was first introduced in 1946 to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and it has remained a constant part of everyday American coinage ever since. In 1996, the Denver Mint struck an astonishing 1.4 billion of these dimes, each clad in its familiar copper-nickel composition and bearing that modest D Mint mark indicating its origin at Denver. Because so many were produced, most are worth their face value just 10 cents, even in decent condition. That's the reality most collectors start with. Yet here's where the narrative changes. A coin's value isn't just about how many were made, it's about how many remain in superb condition many years later. Most of those 1.4 billion 1990-60 Roosevelt dimes circulated in hands, bags, and tills for decades, accumulating the scratches, knocks, and wear that accompany everyday use. But a tiny fraction of these coins avoided that fate. They were tucked away in collections, forgotten in drawers, or carefully stored in albums. Those survivors, especially those graded by professional services as extra fine or higher, are the ones collectors today seek out. When you hold an extra fine 1990-60 dime, you're holding something rare in a world where rarity is defined not just by scarcity, but by condition and quality. In an extra fine grade, you can still see sharp detail on Roosevelt's hair, crisp lettering, and well-defined relief that hasn't been worn flat by decades of circulation. Those surviving coins represent a tiny percentage of the original mintage, and that's what gives them appeal at auction. So what happens when you take one of these extra fine Denver dimes and put it on the modern market? Here's where the numbers get interesting. Standard pricing guides place the value of an ordinary circulated 1990-60 dime at just above face value, around $10,000 to maybe $63,000 if it's lightly worn. But once you're dealing with coins that are extra fine or uncirculated, values rise. Online coin books and market guides note that an uncirculated example can be worth a few dollars, and certified pieces graded by services like PCGS or NGC can demand premium prices. To put it in real terms, auctions and dealer archives show that certain graded 1990-60 Roosevelt dimes have sold for dozens or even millions of dollars, depending on how high the grade goes and whether the coin shows full bands and superior eye appeal. There are documented auction sales where a 1990-60 with exceptional quality earned well above its common marketplace value, with some certified coins fetching upward of triple-digit prices when market demand is high and bidders recognize the premium grade. But let's be honest, that doesn't happen with every coin. Most extra fine 1990-60 dimes command moderate premiums, but what makes them exciting is that the potential is there. When collectors or investors spot a coin that seems to transcend its mass-produced origins and exhibits strong luster, sharp details, and no significant marks, they pay attention. They compare it with sold listings on auction archives. They look at population reports that show how few examples exist in top grades. And then the bidding starts. As the YouTube camera lingers over a gleaming 1990-60 dime in extra fine condition, polished but not perfect, what we're really showing is a story of preservation, chance, and the magic of condition. This is a coin that could have been spent, traded, lost, or melted down like millions of others. Instead, it survived, and in that survival, it gained potential value far beyond its 10-cent face. Collectors know that every coin tells a story, and this Denver dime, in its cool patina, sharp relief, and quiet grace, tells one about patience, passion, and the unpredictable journey from pocket change to collector treasure. That's why, when the gavel finally falls at an auction, the smile on the winning bidder's face isn't just about dollars, it's about discovery. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of rare Roosevelt dimes, hit that like button, subscribe for more coin discoveries, and let us know in the comments which of these rare dimes would you most want to add to your collection. Thanks for watching, and remember, you never know what treasure might be hiding in your pocket change.